Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
There's in the first part of this story. Wait for the second part. Finally, she stopped, took my face in her hands, looked into my eyes, and said, "I love you with all my heart. I want to be only with you, and only with you." I thought for a moment. I knew I was madly in love with her and asked a very pragmatic question. "Okay, I guess you're going to quit the sugar daddy business?" I made this decision a few weeks ago, but I'm still taking myself out of this relationship. Some of my sugar daddies had fallen in love with me, and I didn't want to hurt them any more than necessary, so I was completely honest with them and told them that I met someone and fell in love. She then continued, "I need to find another job. Hours at Katie's store don't cover rent and lodging." She noticed that I still hadn't said anything about us, and she was right. There was still a struggle in my head, but at the same time, my feelings for her remained unchanged. Okay, I still need a little time to process this because I'm a little jealous, to say the least, but the thought of losing you scares me to death, I said, and immediately made a decision, at least at the level of ideas. "Come on then, move to my loft officially. Complete girl." She started crying again, but this time the tears were mixed. Half happy, half sad, or so it seemed to me. She stopped and said, "I would love to, but please don't ever let this turn into you being my sugar daddy." I laughed and said, "Then how about just an exclusive guy? Unless you have some weird grandfather tendencies that you haven't told me about." Melissa just rushed at me, hugged me, and kissed me. This was a clear sign of agreement. We got up, and Melissa started jumping around the room happily. Many of the guests were still hungover, and Katie was already up, but clearly not ready for Melissa's vivacity in the middle of the day. The two of them left and talked for a long time. Melissa told Katie she was going to move in with me, but gave her time to find another housemate. I later learned that Katie was happy for her, but she kept giving me dirty looks, saying, "You should take good care of her and not break her heart." I also noticed a hint of sadness in her eyes. Katie loved Melissa too, and knew it would limit their time together. I had an internal panic. What am I doing? I thought. I just asked a 21-year-old girl, 10 years younger than me, to move into the loft with me. I knew people thought she was too young, but we had already discussed it and gone through a lot of things. There was no denying that it was more than just attraction. I think I was just scared to death that I would end up getting my heart broken. I have never loved anyone as much as I love Melissa. I panicked because of the age difference, but I was sure of one thing. If I ran away now, I would regret it for the rest of my life. To hell with it, I thought. I will love her without looking back and enjoy every second. She was simply wonderful, and there was so much more to her than just the fantastic intim or how damn attractive she was. I would love this woman even if she grew old or gained weight. I sighed in my heart and told myself that love would be in the driver's seat. I smiled and opened my morning beer to celebrate. Melissa was ending her relationship with her sugar daddies. She laughed when I asked her a bunch of questions because in this situation, I could finally ask them. I think I developed some kind of burning curiosity about her past, but at that moment, I did not understand what it was. Either way, I couldn't get enough of Melissa. She officially moved into the loft, and we got along great. It was almost the same as before, only now it was official. We traded my old car for a nice car that Mel could use for work. The loft was my studio, and having a car was a strange luxury. We had the pleasure of choosing a silver sedan from a small dealership around the corner. I was over the moon. My job was going incredibly well, my business was booming, and with Melissa, I was having the best time of my life. I've always been an intimacy active guy, adventurous to a certain extent, constantly horny, and deeply satisfied with giving pleasure. At my core, I was self-centered, but in my nightlife, it was the opposite. I was able to accept pleasure, but the real euphoria came when my partner remained in a state of complete satisfaction. I was also a bit of a voyeur, and watching her pleasure herself was part of that thrill. We developed a pretty fun routine. Melissa was working part-time at a marijuana dispensary and was looking for another job. We usually had parties during the week and spent the weekends having fun in the city. I started drinking more, and it seemed like illicit substances were also becoming a regular thing rather than an occasional thing. I've had bad experiences with this in the past, especially in toxic relationships, so even though I was a fun drunk, I had serious concerns about my addiction. Our dealer was my landlord, Jessie, or JJ as we called her. She adored Melissa, and they often went somewhere together when I wasn't there. I had some concerns about this, but not serious ones. At that moment, we were both just enjoying life. We hung out a lot and worked a lot. We also started taking short trips by car. I met her parents. They lived in a small town on a lake, and her cousin happened to be there. That first day, as it turned out, we already knew each other. I passed this test too. Apparently, her parents saw that we were in love and were happy for Melissa. It was Monday, the week before Katie's party. I was at the loft, still lying in bed. I heard Dave talking on the phone in the studio. The music played quietly, and the old wooden walls seemed muted and warm, and I was all warm and blissful. We had an incredible weekend together. I remembered how I arrived on Friday afternoon, and since I had the key, I opened the door myself. Dave was sitting at the table, but in the blink of an eye, he jumped out of his chair, ran up to me, and hugged me tightly, spinning around with a big smile. "Damn, how I missed you," he said. I responded with a hug and immediately felt a desire awaken in me. He kissed me, and it was a long, passionate kiss. We were perfect for each other. I immediately felt myself becoming excited. After the kiss, I was breathless. "I missed you too, honey, but I was here on Monday, wasn't I?" I said. Usually, at such moments, I would drag him straight to bed, but I had recently met with a client, so I tried to stall for time. This client was one of my longest-standing sugar daddies. We spent the night together from Thursday to Friday, and he invited me to a formal event where I wore a cocktail dress to dinner and as his date for the entire evening. I knew we would soon have a serious conversation. I needed to talk to Joe about finalizing our agreement. I was so in love with Dave that I knew I couldn't continue leading a double life. Dave and I never discussed the exclusivity of our relationship, but I felt like he was just with me, just as I was with him. This warmed my soul because I was crazy about him. Damn, I thought what a girl of easy virtue I was. I had already begun to minimize meeting with clients and tried not to enter into intimate relationships with them. It wasn't serious with some of them, and I had already broken up with them. With the others, I hesitated, tried to figure myself out. The income from these meetings was not small, and I understood that I would have to look for another job. Katie couldn't offer me a full-time job, and I wanted to be close to Dave's loft. My client Joe was a very successful Asian businessman, and he liked young, slender brunettes. He was short, but he always asked me to wear heels when we went out. I towered over him, which obviously turned him on. He was kind to me, gave me gifts, and gave us wonderful evenings. He was cute, and in with him was easy. It seemed to him that he was constantly in an excited state, like as soon as the wind blew on him, he was ready. However, after that, he was always very gentle. He massaged me, dried me with a soft, warm towel, and just enjoyed the time spent together in bed. He never wanted a second time. He was a true gentleman and perhaps the most unobtrusive of all my clients. He liked it when I was dominant. One day, I thought he would like the idea of a cuckold, where I would tell him about other men and how big they were, and how they could have a night with me for hours, but that didn't turn him on at all. I think for him, love was expressed in everything except intimate. For him, it was more important to see my pleasure from dinner or an evening out than my intimate satisfaction. He just liked having me around, and the rare moments of intimacy were enough for him. I was sad that I would have to break off this relationship. Last night at the gala, I stood alone on the side while Joe went to get champagne. Suddenly, a very handsome guy came up to me and started flirting. I must admit, he did it very skillfully. He was tall, fit, with dark hair and eyes, and an impressive bulge was clearly visible in his trousers. It amused me. I was with Joe, which meant that at that moment, I was completely devoted to him, while this peacock was trying to impress me. Joe walked up with 2 glasses of champagne. The guy completely ignored him, trying to get rid of Joe as if he were an annoying fly, and directed all his attention to me, hoping that I would notice his excitement. This amused me, although I usually like this type of man. Joe walked up to him, keeping his cool. He was a head shorter than the guy. The difference in height was astonishing, but Joe's confidence made him hesitate a little. Joe simply said, "Steven, I'm sure there are a dozen women here who would want what you're clearly offering, but you're boss, and I think it would be very stupid for you to piss me off." Joe didn't blink and continued, "However, your boss thought it would be helpful if we got to know each other." The guy was still confused and seemed to be preparing for a conflict, but Joe continued, "Hi, Stephen. I'm Joe Wong, and this is my companion, Melissa." Joe stood next to me, handing me one of the glasses and wrapping his left arm around me. The bulge in Stephen's trousers instantly disappeared, and his face became so pale that I couldn't help but chuckle lightly. Stephen barely noticed Joe's hand extended to him. The guy looked like he wanted to fall through the ground. "Oh, damn, Mr. Wong, it's very nice to meet you," he muttered, shaking his hand quickly. "Sorry, I didn't realize it was your companion. Sorry for interfering." It always amazes me how a confident man can be incredibly pretty. In front of me stood a short man, barely 55 tall, who calmly put this handsome man in his place. It was a real aphrodisiac. "It was a pleasure, Stephen," Joe said with a slight smile, clearly letting go of the guy. Stephen hastily apologized and disappeared with the look of a beaten dog. I watched as he quickly walked up to his boss, an older man who was having a hard time holding back his laughter. Joe raised his glass to the old man, and he laughed too. Joe knew Vlad would turn this into a lesson for his nephew. "Melissa, do you mind if we leave now? I'm really excited and would like to spend some time alone with you," Joe said. I tensed up a little inside, but after what happened, it would be cruel to refuse him right now. "They'll talk to him later," I thought. "Oh yeah, let's go," I replied to Joe and whispered to him, that was hot. He simply smiled and looked down. We walked around the hall, saying goodbye to the most important people. It was obvious that Joe was respected and even somewhat feared among the guests. I've always wondered what he really does. He said he was involved in real estate development, but something told me he had other things going on. Although I'm only 21, I've spent enough time on the streets to know when it's better not to ask, not to hear, and especially not to say anything. Joe was beaming with pleasure all evening, and I knew he was excited the entire time. It was unexpectedly exciting how a small man could dominate any situation with enormous confidence. When we were almost done, the last people we said goodbye to were Vladimir Tikhonov and his nephew, Stephen, the same guy who had pestered me. As Joe approached them, I noticed Stephen turn pale again and lowered his eyes. I smiled, and Vlad simply beamed with pleasure. "Joe, good to see you," Vlad said, then turned to me. "Melissa, you look amazing as always. I hope my nephew Stephen didn't offend you or say anything inappropriate." I looked at Joe and winked, then quickly replied, "No, he was a real gentleman. He just wanted to show me something and ask my opinion about the party." I smiled at Stephen, and he blushed again. The whole scene was so cute. Joe and Vlad exchanged glances and burst out laughing. We said goodbye warmly, and on the way out, I turned to Joe and asked, "What was all that?" Joe smiled and hugged me close, looking into my eyes. "Vlad told his nephew that he noticed how you were looking at him and advised him to come to you," Joe said. I gasped and said, I wouldn't do that." Joe quickly responded, "Of course I know that, Melissa, and so does Vlad." He knew his nephew was stupid and wanted to teach him a lesson. Never pester a woman without first finding out why she is here and who she came with. "Observe first." He continued, "Vlad and I both saw him start grabbing his pants as he approached you, and we thought it was funny. Vlad knew I would enjoy dominating his nephew," Joe added. "He's young, well-built, but stupid," Joe said, "but he is my nephew. I thought we could have a little fun with him." Joe was Vlad's largest business partner, and although Vlad was rich and the typical alpha male, also known for being huge in his pants, their respect for each other was mutual and deep. "You saw the rest yourself, Mel," Joe said. "It really turned me on. When we returned to his house, Joe attacked me. It was so unlike him. He was stronger than he looked, and by the time we got to the bedroom, most of our clothes were already on the floor. He picked me up, threw me on the bed, and began to zealously take possession of me. He knew I loved my breasts getting attention, but this evening was all about his immediate need. Joe showed me affection with unprecedented energy. I had planned not to have a night with him that evening, but I could see that this was a special moment for him. Joe always knew how to please, and I even began to feel a familiar excitement. Nothing like what Dave did, but I still enjoyed it. Joe was so into it that I began to wonder if maybe Dave had somehow fixed my inability to experience pleasure with other men. I really liked what Joe was doing, but then he stopped. He then started having an intimate with me hard and fast. It was incredible how excited he was, and again I felt that pleasant tingling sensation. For a moment, I thought he was having a heart attack, but then he exhaled and collapsed on top of me. My legs were still up, and this little man was lying on my shoulder, breathing heavily. It was erotic in its own way. My clients and I had a rule. I never kissed them, but realizing that this was most likely our last meeting, I hugged his head and kissed him on the lips deeply and passionately. He was surprised, but I just looked him in the eye and said, "That was amazing, Joe." To which he replied, "So sorry, Melissa, I don't know what came over me." He caught his breath and stood up, saying he was going to the shower. I knew he preferred to shower alone unless he invited me to join. I took off my heels and stockings and put on a silk robe. Joe always liked to drink scotch after intimate, so I went to the living room to get everything ready for him. He had exquisite taste, and I liked it. I chose a bottle and realized it was now or never. I was already mentally packing my things and getting my clothes ready in case he asked me to leave. Joe joined me in the living room. The shower seemed to calm him down, and he regained his usual reserve. We drank a glass of scotch, and of course, Joe immediately noticed that I was about to tell him something. "Melissa, what's on your mind?" he asked. He had always been a man of few words, and I respected that, so I decided to tell him the truth. I put the glass down, took his hands, and looked into his eyes. "Joe, I met someone," I said, then paused. "And it looks like things are getting pretty serious." He looked at me and smiled, then leaned over and hugged me, simply saying, "I'm happy for you, Melissa." I immediately realized that he understood everything. This meant that our relationship was coming to an end. We had always discussed how we avoided affection, but I could see tears welling up in his eyes. He was still smiling, but I could tell he had feelings for me. Joe stood up, poured us another glass of scotch, and asked me to tell him about Dave. He wanted to make sure he wasn't a bad person. It was difficult for me to hide my obvious admiration for Dave, but Joe listened carefully. After all, he knew this day would come. Usually, he said he didn't worry about his girls, but this time was different. Joe paused for a moment, then blushed slightly and politely asked me, "Melissa, can we spend one more night together?" He looked embarrassed, and I felt sorry for him, so I quickly responded, "Joe, you have always been kind and respectful to me. Of course, I'll stay." We finished our glasses and returned to the bedroom. Not once the entire evening did he ask me about ending with Dave. He just pressed himself against me and slowly, tenderly began to make love to me. Everything was soft and calm, without haste. As usual, he didn't last long, but he fell asleep with a smile on his face. In the morning, we made love again. This time, it was obvious that he was showing his true feelings. I appreciated it, and I didn't even have to fake it that much. After we got dressed, we sat down and drank coffee. At that moment, I saw a thought flash across his face. He was always loud when he thought, but you had to know him well to notice it. Then his face softened, he smiled, and his whole demeanor changed. "Melissa, I would like to thank you. You've been one of the best things in my life, but I think it's time for me to find what you found." His smile became wider, and his eyes brighter. He was truly a very handsome man, and I knew he would make an amazing husband and father. We finished breakfast, and Joe started checking to make sure I had everything I needed. He gave me some clothes we had there and made me promise that I would call him if I needed help. Before I left, he made me look at him and said in a fatherly tone, "Melissa, I want only the best for you. I deeply respect your integrity, and you have always behaved with dignity." He paused and added, "I'm concerned about your pill habit." I looked at him about to say something, but he raised his hand and continued, "Melissa, I know you're hiding it and that you're not addicted, but I also know this is a very tricky pill. I've seen many people succumb to its influence." I had never seen him so serious. "I'm fine, Joe," I started. "Melissa, true love is the enemy of addiction. You may believe that love will conquer all, but addiction doesn't tolerate it. If you keep going, pills and addiction will make you into someone you're not. They will destroy you and make you despair. If you really love this man, you must understand that true love doesn't happen to everyone in life. I once experienced true love, but I lost it because I was addicted to money. You're young, but if your instincts tell you it's him, please be careful." Okay, there was nothing to say. I thought Joe was wrong, but his words sounded so fatherly and wise that they were impossible to ignore. Then we laughed and remembered stories about the things we did together. He talked about what he would miss, and we laughed about last night as we reminisced about the young, stupid guy. We hugged. I cried, but he remained firm and stood as best he could while we said goodbye. I left feeling both sad about the end and relieved. I couldn't wait to meet Dave later that day. When I was at Dave's and he was kissing me all over, I made an excuse to take a shower by telling him that when he finished work, we would go to dinner. I knew he was leaving on Monday afternoon, so I wanted to spend the whole weekend with him. We went to dinner at our favorite Thai place, but we decided not to bother and went to our local bar near the loft. Dave looked at me more and more with a wild look, and I knew that he was terribly excited. I was there too. It was so noticeable that people started looking at us. As we walked home through the back streets, he never left my side. We kept stopping to kiss. We were almost there when he pulled me into a small alley between two buildings. It was only 100 yards from his loft. He pushed me against the wall and started showering me with kisses. "Stop it, Dave," I gasped. "We're almost home." He ignored me. I was caught up in passion on the street from a man who had no intention of stopping. Any objections or fear of being caught flew out of my mind. I saw cars driving past the entrance to the alley. This excited me even more. Then he started having a night with me. He tried to merge with me with some crazy impulse. All this time, he did not stop showering me with hot, passionate kisses. Finally, he gently lowered me to the ground. That was so hot, I thought. "Sorry, Mel," he said, trying to catch his breath. "I don't know what came over me." "Honey, you have nothing to apologize for," I replied, still breathing heavily. It was one of the hottest experiences of my life. "You can do this to me anytime." At that moment, a group of people passing by the alley stopped and saw us trying to put on our clothes. I gave them a great view of my breasts. The guy's jaw dropped and the girls giggled. They left, but the girls continued to giggle, and the guys were clearly excited. I didn't feel embarrassed. On the contrary, I was even more excited by the fact that we were almost caught. We walked back into the loft through the back door, and Dave started kissing me again. "Well, some guys sure are lucky," said a voice in shock. We looked back and saw that it was that cool artist guy who lived on the first floor of the corner loft, looking at us. We both apologized and then walked up the back steps to the loft. Damn, I was still incredibly horny. I knew this was just the beginning of one of our love marathons. Just the thought of it made me even hornier than I already was. My whole body was shaking with anticipation. That night, we had an intimate nonstop. Dave was tireless. This man had an incredible amount of stamina, night appeal, and skill. Early on Saturday morning, we ended everything with mutual, simply incredible intimate. "Oh God, Mel, you're so hot. I can't even tell you how amazing it was," Dave said. "You are by far the most incredible woman I have ever made love to." He looked me straight in the eyes. I saw the fire in his heart. This fire penetrated through me, and he said, "I love you." I looked at him, kissed him, and replied, "I love you too, Dave, with all my heart. I want to be in your arms forever." We were completely exhausted. Both of us were devastated, but glowing with happiness. Dave got up to get some cold water. We drank it while wiping each other down, just lying on the bed, hugging each other, both with big smiles on our faces. We felt warm everywhere, our hearts filled with this eternal feeling of deep love. We fell asleep hugging each other and woke up the next day in the same position. We made slow, tender love, taking our time, with no expectations. All this time, he didn't stop looking at me, slowly and deeply penetrating me. You could hear our hearts beating. I was so in love that it scared me, scared that I could feel so much. We lazily drank our morning coffee, had lunch at the bistro, and then went to the grocery store. Dave was going to cook me dinner, fettuccine Alfredo from scratch. I was just beginning to realize that he was a true foodie with deep culinary skills. What could the girl do? I didn't do cocaine bumps on purpose to regain my appetite. I hadn't eaten anything for the past 3 days. The dinner was light since we were both thirsty from partying the night before, and today we had dinner in the loft and then a game of billiards. I had a surprise for Dave. After that, dinner was amazing. We were completely relaxed and went to play billiards. I decided to wear a short skirt, but with thigh-high stockings and heels. I had long legs, and when I bent over to take a shot, you could see the top of my stockings. I knew Dave liked it, but so did a lot of the other guys in the bar. I got dirty looks from some of the guys' girlfriends a couple of times, but I also got a few winks. Having girls flirt with me was a big turn-on for me. I knew Dave noticed guys staring at me, but he didn't understand the subtle signs when girls were flirting with each other. We had a great time and made new friends. It was obvious that Dave was having a hard time containing his excitement while we were playing pool. I was getting hotter watching how excited he was. Before we left, I went to the toilet and took off my panties. On the way back home, I put on a little show for Dave and the Uber driver when I lifted my skirt, threw my leg over my head, and started fondling myself. Thank God it was a quick trip. We jumped out of the car. The driver turned red and was clearly excited. We turned on the music and sat in the office, talking and laughing. I took off my skirt and top, leaving myself in stockings and high heels, enjoying the lightness of the moment. Dave came up to me, took my hand, and lifted me up to kiss it. His touch was gentle, but there was a passion in it that we both shared. He stroked my legs, and we were both engrossed in the moment, enjoying every bit of intimacy. We moved toward the bedroom, exchanging a few kisses. The mutual attraction between us was obvious, but we were in no hurry. I led him along, and he slipped and fell awkwardly to the floor, which made us laugh. We simply enjoyed being together, sincerely, without further ado. When we reached the bedroom, our movements became smooth and natural, as if we were dancing. Dave watched me with a smile, and I watched him. Our conversation without words was full of emotions. And finally, we both fell on the bed, hugging each other. We didn't talk about love, but at that moment, it was everywhere, enveloping us with warmth and sincerity. I lay down next to him, feeling his breath next to me. He whispered, "You are the most amazing woman I have ever met." We just lay next to each other, enjoying the silence, which spoke more than words could. We stayed in each other's arms for a long time, enjoying the connection we had. Later that night, we made love again. We had a classic Sunday afternoon together. We woke up and took a lazy shower together. For a change, there wasn't much space, so it was fun. He left first, and I stayed to finish. Then we went to our favorite cafe next door for a fatty breakfast, coffee, and a complete lack of stress. We stopped at our local store for some snacks. It was football day, after all. It felt like a scene from a sitcom. The Korean family who owned the store was amazingly funny and knew us by name. Our neighborhood was quite sketchy, so all sorts of characters visited the store, and Joe, the owner, knew 1,000 stories. We went back to the loft, pulled out the sofa bed, piled up a bunch of pillows, and watched TV while cuddling. Dave gave me slow, gentle night. Everything was calm and without haste. I called his style zen, quiet and deep. I liked this simple, leisurely intim with him. Dave spent some time packing for his trip while I talked to Katie about work. The next day, I wrote several messages to my clients who had been asking to spend time with them for a while. We ordered food from a local restaurant for takeout, comfort food, and I noticed that I might have started to gain weight. The sun was shining so brightly into the loft that it was just the perfect day. He was so relaxed and calm. I never told Dave directly how much I loved those simple moments with him. We went to bed early after watching a movie. Dave had an afternoon flight, so there was no stress. I had to go to work at the store, and I was going to talk to Katie about how I was feeling. I was very nervous before bringing Dave to the party. Katie was on a roll and arranged everything to invite as many of Colin's hot friends as possible. She was determined to show me how many guys our age wanted to date me. "You'll love Dave, Kat," I said. "He's a real man. We're perfect for each other, and I've never had a better lover." "Well, we'll see, hillbilly," Katie replied. I looked at her, narrowed my eyes, and said, "Be nice to him. I love this guy, so please don't ruin this for me." Katie said, "Okay, I'll give him a chance. But if he turns out to be just an old fool using you, I'll kill him." When Dave arrived, I was delighted. He came with 2 cases of beer, which Colin immediately liked. I just wish Colin would stop with the POA Warbucks joke. I immediately hugged Dave and couldn't wait to introduce him to Katie. I knew I needed to leave them alone, so I went to socialize. Katie was right. The guys at the party were really hot. Several of them started trying to pick me up. It was funny watching stone guys try to flirt. The same guy Katie was talking about was very charming. He had so much energy that I glanced down a couple of times, wondering if Kathy was telling the truth about his dignity. I think he noticed, but I didn't care. I had a man who drove me crazy on a million different levels. I played my role as the hostess with the coolest guest, maintaining a flirtatious atmosphere, keeping everyone in high spirits. Katie brought her other single girlfriends, and I had Dave. I glanced nervously at Katie and Dave a few times, but it was obvious that Katie was having fun. She sat in her flirting position, and they both laughed. I later learned that it took Dave 10 minutes to melt Katie's outer armor. She found me a little later and dragged me to the bathroom. When we got inside, she pushed me against the door and kissed me. She reached under my skirt and began to caress me. It was very hot. "So, how you like this hot guy I invited you to?" Katie asked. "I saw you talking to him. You know how I feel about Dave," I replied. "He drives me crazy. Didn't you like him?" Katie stood back, smiled, and said, "Redneck. He's cool, he's smart, he's witty, he has those eyes, and he's handsome. You should do something with his hair. It's high time to cut it, otherwise he's just saturated with intimate energy." I screamed and hugged her. "I know. Dave is so great, and he loves me, Kat. He really loves me." "Yes, Mel, it's obvious," Katie replied. "I even told him that if he breaks your heart, I will kill him." I knew she wasn't joking. "When will you tell him about your other side?" Katie asked. "Obviously, he's okay with your flirting, but how will he react to you sleeping with others?" I frowned and said, "Tomorrow morning. I'll tell him everything." Colin was already very drunk. Dave was having fun, and most of the guys had stopped actively hitting on me, except for one strange little guy who kept following me around. We were happy and just enjoying the moment. We left the bathroom, and I found Dave. We really started having fun. A little later, I was pressed against the back hallway by the same hot guy Katie was talking about. I was high and drunk, and he just started kissing me. He pushed me against the wall, and I felt him. At first, I was shocked but quickly came to my senses and pushed him away. "Hey, thanks, sure, but I have a boyfriend," I told him. "With that old man," he grinned. "He definitely doesn't have what I have." I laughed and said, "I really doubt you can do to me what he does." I was angry, and if Dave had seen us, it could have ended badly. This guy was still standing there, definitely clutching his manhood, as if nothing had happened. So I walked up to him and said, "Do that again, and I'll hurt you." I smiled as he wilted and walked away, and I returned to the party. Even though it made me angry, I admitted to myself that it was damn exciting. It was difficult for me to come to terms with the idea that I could no longer be as relaxed in relationships with men as before. The rest of the party went off without a hitch. Everyone liked Dave, but Colin continued to call him Papa Warbucks. Dave just chuckled and accepted it with dignity. I hoped he wouldn't be too bothered by the topic, but the age difference was something we struggled with all the time. Being a sugar girl taught me how to deal with these things, but I never wanted Dave to feel like I was only with him because of his success. God, my former sugar daddies were just fabulously rich. By the end of the evening, everyone had already had a good time, and that strange little guy began confessing his love to me. I always tried to be polite, which made Dave frown. Yes, I had been with very generously gifted men in my life, but I was not someone who chased size. I was still wondering how Dave gave me this opportunity, or was it him who was able to do it? Then someone ran into the backyard and started vomiting over the fence. Katie asked Colin to make sure this guy stayed on the street. That hot guy Katie had been talking about had already found a girlfriend, and she was sitting on his lap, dancing. He looked at me and smiled, a little creepy, I thought. Dave was too drunk to go home, so he stayed in my room. He even had to chase away that strange little guy, but he handled it calmly. I was loud on purpose to get back at Katie. We eventually fell asleep and woke up in the morning looking at each other. I knew Dave had passed Katie's test and had dealt with the craziness of the party the night before. Some of the girls even flirted with him, which made me extremely jealous. Now I knew for sure I was truly, madly in love. My eyes sparkled with this feeling. The first thing Dave said to me was, "I love you, Mel. I can no longer play the role of the cool, indifferent guy. I'm head over heels in love with you." I was internally jubilant, but then I sighed. Sadness appeared on my face, and I said, "Honey, we need to talk." Dave's face immediately contorted with worry. It was time to tell him everything, Later that day, when we returned to our attic, I was over the moon, openly telling Dave about my feelings for him. Admitting what I was doing turned out to be better than I could have imagined. He even managed to make everything funny. Then he invited me to move in with him. It made sense since I already spent all my free time in the loft. In addition, it would ease the situation with money. I had already started thinking about finding a downtown job and was excited about the idea of living with Dave. Everything seemed so right. Melissa goes to Mexico. We enjoyed life as a couple, living in a loft. We bought a new used car together. I needed a car to get to the store. He even found ways to give me more space for my clothes. Lofts aren't known for having a lot of closets, and he was a real hoarder. Everything was going great for him at work, and I met his friends. We also started hanging out with our hostess and her friends. Very soon, we developed a regular weekend schedule. We loved the art gallery area downtown. There were great bars and clubs, and, of course, our favorite pool hall. We went to concerts, played billiards, visited atmospheric bars, and our usual establishments. Then we had huge parties in the loft until the morning. We lived in high society. I got a job as a hostess at a chic restaurant in the city center, and Dave loved my outfits. I wore dresses, heels, and thigh-high stockings especially for him. People were always trying to pick me up at work, but I was with Dave, and we were having a great time. If it's even possible, we fell more and more in love with each other. It was one of the best times of my life. We made trips to my parents' house. He successfully passed their test. I want to see his parents, or rather his mother and stepfather. And I passed this test. His hometown was cheerful, but full of closed groups. Most of his friends were cool, but some made me feel uncomfortable. They were a little suspicious of my youth, and I thought there was some story behind it that Dave hadn't told me yet. I suspected they were simply protecting his interests. I always felt a little uncomfortable when his friends started talking about intellectual topics, but his best friends were the most sincere and real people. They loved me. At the wedding of one of his longtime friends, I was very nervous, but when I stood there in my little black dress and heels, with a glass of whiskey and a cigar, discussing business with one of his mechanic friends, it definitely took all the doubts away. I also won over most of the girls in his small town, being a good listener when everyone was drunk. That usually makes a great first impression. We both grew up in small towns, and I later learned that it was a big deal to be accepted into that circle. I loved going there, but I could never live there. His work was going so well that he was given a bonus, a vacation trip. He took me to a place in Mexico that he went to every year alone. It wasn't a fancy place, but more of a surfer's hideout and a popular spot for travelers. We didn't have any confirmed reservations, but he didn't seem to worry about it. He knew the owner of a surf hotel and brought with him a list of things that were hard to get in Mexico. I was delighted because I had never been anywhere other than my parents' house and the big city. I needed to get a passport, but it didn't take long. I also bought a pair of new skimpy bikinis because Dave said there wasn't much to do there other than eat, drink, lie on the beach, and sunbathe. It was a fun adventure. Dave could get a little nervous about little things, but once we arrived, his stress level dropped quickly. We arrived late in the afternoon and stayed at the Surf Inn. We got a room on the first floor at the end of the corridor. There weren't many rooms, and the furnishings were fairly basic. A bed on a cement platform with built-in nightstands, a small closet, a chest of drawers, and a bathroom with an open shower and no hot water. Although we were told that the huge rain barrel heats up during the day, so the shower was warm. After lunch, we quickly unpacked, and I realized Dave was right. I didn't really need a lot of stuff. It was still very hot, so I put on a bikini, a pair of shorts, and sandals. We went upstairs for dinner. The hotel was right on the beach. It was late afternoon, and we were looking due west. The waves were big, and there were a lot of surfers in the water. The waves were huge, and the sun was starting to set over the ocean. I could smell the salt in the strong wind. I had never been to such an exotic place. I thought we were going somewhere special for dinner, but it turned out that this place was special. We arrived early and grabbed a great table in the corner overlooking the ocean. We started off calmly, and I ordered a margarita. Yes, I know, a little corny, but as they say, when in Rome. Very soon, the place filled up. Surfers and other couples began to arrive. It seemed that Bruce, the hotel owner, had just received a shipment of meat from Texas. I ordered fish and meat, Dave ordered steak, and the place began to buzz. As soon as anyone recognized Dave, they immediately approached us. It turned out to be a popular place for people from his hometown. Anyway, this guy turned out to be a classic smoker and offered Dave some. When I returned, two pretty girls were already sitting at our table. They were from Sweden, and it turned out that Bruce's surfer friend Tony brought them here because there were no more places available. I was a little drunk and high, but the girls were great. They ordered food, and Dave and I each took another portion. Dave's friend Tony came back and joined us, starting to drink with us. Bruce, sweaty from working on the grill, came over too. He was incredibly funny and brought with him a plastic Pepsi bottle with some clear liquid. It was homemade mezcal, the purest product of the mountains. We all took a shot, and it just tasted terrible but was incredibly strong. We all immediately found ourselves in a state of complete intoxication. Tony got everyone started on mezcal shots with 7-Up, and then we decided to go see some live music on the beach. So, off we went. The night was still hot, but not as stuffy as during the day. The ocean breeze gently touched my skin, and the waves crashed loudly against the shore. It was great. 10 people walked along the beach road in a state of complete relaxation. We stood out only because of our pale skin. Anna and Lena, our new friends from Sweden, were amazing, and we quickly became friends. When we got to the club, it was more like a tent next to the beach with folding tables and a makeshift bar. The band played Latin music, and they were great. Lena started dancing with some older man. He was tanned, wearing a t-shirt and shorts, and Lena was dressed almost the same as me, in a bikini and a pair of sandals. She was a little shorter than me, with straight hair, stunning eyes, and small, neat breasts. She looked incredibly pretty, and oh my God, how she danced. It was obvious that Lena was a professional dancer. Her movements were so clear and precise, and her partner was an excellent leader. But all eyes were on Lena. I kept my eyes on her all night, but her dance ignited a real passion in me. My face flushed with heat, and I felt like I wanted her. When we returned to the surf inn, we said goodbye and agreed to see each other the next day. As soon as Dave and I closed the door behind us, I immediately took off my clothes. The next morning, we woke up and had the most amazing breakfast: huevos rancheros and pancakes. The coffee was amazing. We had only one plan for the whole day: to go to the beach and sunbathe. We smoked in the room and put on the same outfit as the night before. Again, I was wearing a bikini with a pair of shorts and sandals. We found a great spot away from the big waves, and a young guy started bringing us as many drinks as we could drink. I swam in the ocean for the first time and was immediately hit by a big wave. I quickly learned to duck dive to get through the surf and avoid rip currents. Dave said there were other, much calmer beaches that we would explore later. I took off my bikini top, and Dave was over the moon as he helped me apply sunscreen. In fact, it was just liberating to walk along the beach in just a thong. By midday, we were pretty sunburned, so we decided to take a break, have lunch, and find some shade. We ate at a tiny local cafe that made epic club sandwiches. They made them one at a time, which drove Dave crazy. But in the end, we were in no hurry, and it was wonderful. By the end of the day, we were both slightly tanned and back at the surf inn. Bruce invited us to a barbecue and made sure we took his advice to just sunbathe and relax. We sat at the bar feeling like real veterans and watched the sun set over the ocean. Tony, Lena, and Anna were there too, and the entire bar and restaurant fell silent as the sun finally disappeared below the horizon. The colors that exploded in the sky after sunset were simply stunning. I was high, but I didn't have to be. We all agreed to take a warm shower and meet again for dinner. I noticed that Lena was looking at me intently, which gave me a pleasant feeling. Our small group began to spend more time together. I was seriously interested in Lena, and that night I flirted with her, and she reciprocated. Dave and I kept partying until 4 o'clock in the morning, and then made love until 6 o'clock. When we came down for breakfast, the kitchen staff was laughing at Dave. After breakfast, Dave approached Bruce and asked what was going on. Bruce laughed and said, "Yes, everyone heard you. The kitchen staff came to work at 5 o'clock in the morning, and they heard you making love for the last hour." I was terrified, and Dave turned as red as his sunburned nose. We laughed and told Lena and Anna about it. That afternoon, Lena began to openly flirt with me. Dave didn't notice until Anna told him about it. We went to another beach, and he didn't say anything to me, but smiled all day. That night, we went into town late. We drank mezcal in one of the bars and ended up at a disco. Tony was with us, and we were all pretty drunk. I started dirty dancing with Lena. It was incredibly exciting. Directly opposite us was a wall of Latinos who were watching us with lust. Tony, realizing the danger, pulled us out of there. When we got back to the surf inn, Tony and Anna had gone to bed, but Lena came with us to our room. Then Dave finally said to both of us, "So, are you going to kiss or not?" Well, now there was no point in hiding my attraction to girls from Dave anymore. Lena and I started kissing, and soon we were tearing off each other's clothes. Dave had this stupid, crazy look on his face. I pulled him toward me, took off his shorts, and began to give him pleasure while Lena caressed my breasts. It was hot, but he was smart enough to stop in time and go into observer mode. I then attacked Lena. I couldn't believe how hot she was without clothes on. It probably looked like a scene from a movie. Dave had a night with me while I satisfied Lena. The next morning, there were the same giggles at breakfast. Again, Bruce came over and said we were moving upstairs to the bridal suite. It was much larger, with a terrace and more privacy. Bruce said that now the other guests would finally be able to get some sleep. This room was simply gorgeous. Most of the hotel guests were couples, and no one seemed angry with us. We later learned that our screams during the night had inspired everyone else. It turned out that the entire surf inn was a real house of pleasure. During our stay, Lena and I continued to kiss and dirty dance for the rest of the week, but didn't try again for a threesome. She understood that I was a little jealous, and Dave tried to be careful too, but it was damn hot. I had never fallen in love with a man like that before, and I panicked at the thought that I could lose him when I saw how he was with Lena. This was something completely new to me. This holiday was absolutely amazing, and later that year, Dave went on an extended business trip to Europe. I joined him for a while, and we saw Anna and Lena in Sweden. No intim this time, but there was still intimate tension between us. Dave said of Mexico, "Damn, the trip to Mexico was crazy. I've been going to this place for years and thought it would be a great adventure for Mel. Life together was everything I had hoped for. I lost weight, and Mel finally convinced me to cut my hair. I was terrified, but it turned out that I have a great head shape for a short haircut. I kept the goatee, and this look suited me very well. Even in Mexico, people who knew me from previous trips didn't immediately recognize me. Bruce was still funny, and his friend Tony from Miami turned out to be a great guy. Lena and Anna from Sweden were also amazing. The night of threesome night with Lena blew my mind. Mel looked like a runway model, and Lena looked like a ballerina. Watching them both without anything in bed that night literally blew my mind. I had never been in this situation before and didn't know what to do. After this trip, our life only improved. This was followed by a trip to Europe. We knew how to throw parties. We went to her parents' house and to my hometown. It had already been a year since we started dating, and I kept waiting for Mel to get tired of me, find a younger guy, or for our age difference to make itself felt. It also continued to bother me that our partying, substance use, and alcohol consumption had become a central part of our fun. It bothered me that she was so young and full of potential while I was at an age when I wanted to settle down and think about family and children. Despite these doubts, we were inseparable. My business was thriving. I was often away on business trips, and Mel kept everything under control in the loft. I couldn't wait to get home every time I came back. We were treated to an epic night of intimate. My feelings for Mel deepened as the second year progressed. She became my best friend. Her empathy and kindness strengthened our bond. I've always been a very private person, but with Mel, I opened up about things that scared the crap out of me. She always knew how to make me feel confident and calm. She also opened up to me. I had never felt such a strong connection with another person. I knew I would be crushed if I ever lost her. I was sure that she was the love of my life. One weeknight, I proposed to her, and she cried and said yes. It was the happiest day of my life. I was terrified, but I knew she was the right woman for me. During this period, we stopped using contraception and simply waited for everything to happen naturally. We both wanted a family, but didn't have a clear plan to set a wedding date or change our lifestyle. We just continued to live and have fun. I was still worried about our substance use, but things were going well. I was making more money, Mel got 2 part-time jobs, and she was planning to go back to college. We enjoyed life and didn't want it to end. A few months later, Katie and I were in the store. There wasn't much going on, so we just ate a couple of THC gummies and started getting high. I was telling Katie about last weekend when Dave and I started with a Friday night party to which we invited a lot of people in his field. There were a lot of his friends there, and I sometimes felt uneasy at such events. Dave was never away. He was a very popular and charismatic guy at these parties. He felt confident, knew how to communicate, and make connections. He was the life of the party. Dave also knew that when we returned to the loft, there would be even more fun lines and long nights of intim. Katie and I, when Dave achieved the perfect balance of beer and substances, we did everything slowly, but then it turned into real madness. He just got wildly excited at that moment. The store door opened, and 2 guys walked inside. I was already very high, so I looked a little blankly, but noticed that the first guy was of average height, had short hair, and was a little cute. The second guy was very nice, tall, and lean. He moved slowly and confidently. He had straight, dark hair, no beard or mustache, and deep brown eyes. His facial features were so unusual that I couldn't place them. When he looked up and met my eyes, he instantly stopped and blushed slightly. I saw his pupils dilate, or maybe I just thought so, because I was high. He then looked at me and smiled, making me blush too. Katie didn't notice this and immediately approached them, asking if they needed help. The smaller guy came up to her and started talking, while the other one came up to me. "Do you have rolling papers?" he asked. I woke up, still dazed, and answered, "What exactly are you looking for?" Nothing special. Just big ones will do." Then I noticed his hands. They were beautiful, large but graceful, with long fingers and masculine outlines. I didn't know why I noticed this, but I quickly came back to reality and turned on my sales mode. I showed him a few options, and as he leaned over to look at them, I caught his scent. He smelled of fresh soap, a clean shave, and a subtle musk. He looked at me and said, "My name is Ryan," holding out his hand. I smiled and handed mine back. His hand was a little damp, as if he was nervous, but it completely enveloped mine, and a slight tremor ran through my body. I quickly removed my hand. "My name is Melissa," I replied. "We talk a little?" He chose some rolling papers for cigarettes, and as they were about to leave, Ryan turned to me and said, "It was very nice to meet you, Melissa. I hope I see you again someday." With these words, they left. Katie turned to me and said, "That guy was pretty cute." I replied, "No more than the hundreds of others who come here to see us." Katie tried to pretend it was no big deal. "And you're engaged," she added with a wink. "Yes, and Dave drives me crazy," I replied with a smile. We finished the workday, and I went back to the loft. Dave was away again, but was due back Friday morning. It was Wednesday, and I had Thursday and Friday off. I had cash, so I went to our hostess place around the corner. JJ was happy to see me and invited me for a drink. JJ and her gang were already having fun. She made me a drink, and I sat down to enjoy my vodka tonic. "Where's Dave?" asked her friend Mike, who had a soft spot for him and always became brooding when we hung out together. "He's in Los Angeles, but he'll be back Friday morning," I replied. "And he'll want to have a big party this weekend." Mike simply smiled. This company had always been a lot of fun. Dave and I got to know them more and more, but more often than not, I spent time with them living with our landlady, who clearly had designs on me and was also our dealer. It was a risky combination, but honestly, it was a hell of a lot of fun. She was the leader of her group. When Dave was away, JJ liked to take me out into the world and keep me in sight like a trophy of sorts. Dave never objected, but I definitely crossed some boundaries. Dave trusted JJ because when we all hung out together, she would tell him everything he wanted to hear. She assured him that she always looked out for me when we were together. But in fact, for JJ, everything was just for her own sake. She looked caring, but her real intentions were selfish. She was always trying to get me into bed. I liked it though, and I thought Dave didn't mind the girly stuff as long as it didn't go too far. "Hey Melissa," JJ said, "tonight we're going to Babo's Bar for oysters. Would you like to join us?" I had planned to have 2 quiet evenings to recover before Dave returned. He often went on business trips, and we already had too many parties, but I still had the next evening to relax. So I thought, why not? Sounds great, I replied. Just let me go back, shower, and get ready. When are you moving out? As soon as you get back, she replied. I walked back to our loft, which was literally just a few steps away. I quickly took a shower and called Dave. We talked for a bit. He was going to dinner with clients. I told him I might spend time with JJ or just relax at home. He told me how much he loved me and asked me to save some energy for him. I told him I loved him too, and we said goodbye. I sat there for a second and realized that I really meant it. I couldn't imagine my life without him. I quickly finished my shower, then put on a pretty outfit, high heels, a skirt, tiny underwear, and a cropped tank top that showed off my toned stomach. I noticed that I'd become even thinner, almost too skinny. The night was epic. JJ was in a great mood and had already had a good drink. However, there was one catch. She started playing a game with me. Every time we went to the toilet, we ended up in her loft with a whole group of people. I was completely drunk, and by some miracle, I made it to the loft. Only in the morning did I remember that I had received messages from him, but ignored them. Apparently, I was too drunk, and besides, he wrote just at the moment when JJ was giving me pleasure. He called me, and I lied, saying I was sleeping. When he texted me, he had no reason not to trust me, so we chatted for a bit, and then he went to work. Meanwhile, I was curled up on the sofa with a severe hangover, just waiting for the coffee to take effect. I spent the whole day on the couch. I didn't eat much, but I drank some wine. After Dave called, we talked for a long time. I missed him and couldn't wait for him to come home tomorrow. He returned early in the day. I drove out in the morning, risking a parking space, to buy more wine and beer for him. I left early enough that the space was still available when I returned. When he came home, I was already in the shower. Then I dressed in knee-high socks and an almost invisible t-shirt. I jumped into his arms and almost knocked him down. We barely made it to the bedroom. He was exhausted, and so was I. After being pestered by the girls for several nights in a row, we had passionate, quick intimacy. It was the best feeling in the world. Then he hugged me, kissed me, and didn't let me go for a long time. We loved each other madly. The weekend was amazing. On Friday evening, we went to a live music concert in the art district. Dave knew everyone, and we were put on the VIP list, so it was easy to arrive late. We were both already quite drunk, and before that, we stopped at JJ's to get something else. I was dressed like a rocker, skinny jeans, cowboy boots, and a tight top. They tried to seduce me all evening. I knew how to politely turn them down, and I knew Dave liked it. This was important to me. If I was with a man at an event, I was only with him. A couple of very drunk guys even told Dave, "You're lucky, bro," and he always smiled and answered, "Yes, that's right, that's exactly right." We had a big party in the loft on Saturday night. There were 3 events going on at the same time: JJ's, ours, and another couple living next door. Several of Dave's friends lived on the floor below, and other friends also arrived. We ended up at JJ's late at night. The girls kept giggling at me, and for a moment, I thought Dave noticed, but JJ was an expert at handling situations like this. They had fun together at parties, and he also fought off JJ's best friend, Mike, when he was high. He liked Dave, but even though Dave was straight, he still took it as a compliment. Thank God, no one let slip how JJ was pleasuring me. We went back to our loft and had marathon intim. Dave could do this forever. When the sun rose, we finally fell asleep. Sunday was a classic lazy day on the couch, ordering greasy food from a nearby diner. It was great. On Monday, I went to work rested and happy. Katie noticed this from the doorway. "Hey, redneck, did you sleep well over the weekend?" she asked with slight sarcasm. I was beaming and told her about the weekend. I also told her how I went out with the girls and let JJ pleasure me. "Damn, you're a real girl," she said. "Did you tell Dave?" "No, I feel a little guilty, but after Mexico, he knows I'm bi, so I don't think he would mind," I replied. "Why don't you bring him a hot girl home for a threesome?" Katie suggested. I thought for a moment and replied, "Yes, it didn't end well in Mexico." I was so jealous that it scared me. I thought about it a little more and wondered if Dave was cheating on me when he was on business trips. I didn't think so, but he was open to games and fun, so I decided we should talk about boundaries. While I was thinking about this, those 2 guys came into the store again. The tall one, Ryan, began to flirt with me more and more. I had already told him I was engaged, but that didn't stop him. He was charming, and I liked the attention. Katie liked that he always bought things from us. He asked me out again, and I politely declined. When they left, Katie looked at me, smiled, and asked, "You like him, don't you?" "Well, yes, he's cute and always polite to me," I replied. Katie looked at me with that look that only she knew how to make. She said, "Well, they came over the weekend, and he asked about you. He asked how serious your relationship was and some other things." "Is it true?" I asked, intrigued. Katie continued, "Yeah, then he went out to answer the phone, and I chatted with his friend. It turned out that Ryan was dating his sister, but they recently broke up. So I asked why, and you know what he told me?" "What?" I asked, even more intrigued. Katie said, "Well, his friend told me Ryan's was so huge his sister just couldn't stand it. She said they needed to start dating other people." Katie laughed and added, "Can you imagine dumping a guy because he's too big? What nonsense. It can't be serious." I was surprised, but you know what they say? Sometimes those skinny guys really have something special. We both laughed, but deep down, I began to wonder if it was true. I knew I wasn't a size person, but sometimes curiosity can be dangerous. Soon, customers came into the store, and we dove back into work. Life went on as usual. I worked 2 or 3 days a week in the store and a few evenings at a hostess restaurant. Dave and I were still having a great time together. Our loft life was epic. He often went on business trips, but sometimes he took me with him. I visited him on the West Coast at his headquarters, spent weekends with my parents, and took trips to his hometown. I always wondered why he was with me. He was such a cool and damn attractive man, just great in bed. I constantly wondered what he saw in me. Sometimes, and not very often, I felt like a trophy wife. But when I really thought about it, I realized that this was not the case. We had much more in common than just an intimate connection. He became my best friend, even more than Katie. I could tell him everything. Not everything, though. The story with JJ was still there, plus he was away more and more often. I felt lonely when Dave was on the road. I was always afraid that one day he would come home and tell me that our relationship was over. Dave on the road in Los Angeles. I was just finishing up the day visiting studios in Los Angeles. I had to go home tomorrow and couldn't wait to see Mel. I was staying at a fancy hotel in Hollywood. There was a recording studio in the basement, and through our connections, I got special rates. It was an amazing place. My room was huge, with a separate living room, garden terrace, and a shower that could fit 10 people. The robes were big and fluffy, and I loved spending the mornings on the deck, drinking French press coffee. Dinner was by the pool in a small restaurant bar, which began to come to life in the evening. The band in the studio enjoyed hanging out while recording and moved into the bar. There were a lot of fans there, and I knew the guys in the band. I never take cocaine with me on trips, but yesterday it was easy to get. I ended up in a room with a few groupies and some guy who knew everyone in Hollywood. One of the girls was a stunningly beautiful Asian girl, and she was clearly giving me signals. I ran away because I didn't want to cheat on Mel, and I had to get up early. My mind began to race at the speed of light, and I started replaying my relationship with Mel and my fears that I had started drinking too much. I screwed up a few morning meetings because I was hungover. Although it didn't cause memory lapses like before, I still hated that feeling of helplessness. There was no doubt. Mel was the love of my life. She quickly became my best friend, which was especially valuable to me since I am a very private person. I thought about it and wondered if she knew how much I loved her. Then I started to think about how much I was opening up to her at all. I suddenly realized that I was still being closed off and maybe not looking vulnerable. Crap. None of this changed how I felt. I've never been so in love, and it scared the crap out of me. Then it dawned on me. What if my fear was sending the wrong signals? My mind quickly jumped to some work trifle, but then I returned to thoughts about Mel and realized that I really wanted to marry her. But is this what she wants? Am I robbing her of the best years of her life? Damn, she'll only be 23 soon. What was I even thinking? What the hell is she doing to me? This thought haunted me constantly. The movie of our relationship began to play slower in my head. I suspected what Mel might be doing while I was away, especially with JJ and her gang. She was a bit of a female delicacy to them. I saw it when we hung out together. Then I remembered that hot Asian girl and sighed heavily, thinking, screw this. Then I realized that I was afraid of coming home and hearing Mel say, "Honey, we need to talk." This thought alone filled me with horror. I behaved badly with previous partners. I had bad habits, and unpleasant things happened to me that made me distrustful of women. But damn it, I decided I was going to get through this and still be loving, loyal, and trusting of Mel. I knew she loved me, and I needed to tell her how much I loved her. Enough of this fear. When I returned from this trip, I did my best to shower Mel with love and be more open. I found this trendy jewelry store in Los Angeles, and when I saw the necklace with a thin silver teardrop pendant, I knew it was absolutely perfect for her. She loved it, and I swear she didn't take it off for a month. The necklace looked gorgeous, especially when she paired it with a short black dress and high heels. It even fit when she wore it to work, to the store, or to a restaurant. I vowed to find matching earrings to go with it. I checked the store a couple of weeks later. It was Tuesday, and I had just returned from lunch with Ryan. He was so charming, and I loved spending time with him. Dave had left again, and I felt lonely. I tried to limit my time with JJ when Dave was away, but when Ryan arrived in the morning, I didn't see anything wrong with having lunch and making a new friend. I was pleased that he was showing interest in me, and I must admit, I was starting to like him internally. My excuse was that Dave might have seen other women on his business trips, so having a male friend near work was not a problem. He was a really simple guy. We were the same age. He didn't go to college, but he was quite charming and had an air of ease about him that was the complete opposite of Dave's tenseness. We talked about his ex, his friend's sister. He said that they were still friends and spent time together on weekends. He lived with his friend, so it would be difficult to avoid meeting his sister. He walked me to the store, said goodbye, and we hugged. Then he got into the car and drove away. When I returned to the store, Katie immediately noticed my flushed face and said, "Hey, redneck, did you seduce someone at lunch?" I blushed even more and replied, "Hell no, Katie. He's just a friend." "Yeah, sure, just a friend," Katie said, teasing me. "What kind of guy is he?" I talked about what we had discussed. "He's a really good guy, relaxed and calm. He's nothing like Dave. I enjoyed spending time with him." Katie looked at me and smiled. She knew me too well. She knew I was having naughty thoughts and said, "Well, you're engaged. Don't forget." I blushed, but I wondered what Dave was even doing to me. I really loved him, but why me? Ryan was my age, we were both easygoing, and I thought maybe we should explore other options. I was excited and thinking about how good Dave was in bed. I was drunk when Dave called me, and I stupidly answered the phone. He was happy that I was with JJ and having fun, but when he asked if I was behaving myself, I snapped, "What? You don't trust me? Maybe I should ask you if you're behaving well. I know about your bad habits, and you have no control over me." Dave got angry and said he was just sitting in the hotel after dinner with a client. He ended the conversation by saying, "Have fun. We'll talk when I get back." I looked at my phone angrily and took another cocktail with Red Bull and vodka. These things really hit the brain. At that moment, I received a message from Ryan, who wrote that he enjoyed our lunch and wanted to meet again. I was in a playful mood, so I flirted by texting him, "Maybe," and then asked the girls to take a photo of me. I sent it to him. He immediately responded, "Damn, you're so hot." I blushed, and then, drunk, I wrote to him, "Are you really big?" To which he replied, "Yes." I wrote back, "Show me." At that moment, the girls distracted me. It was time for shots. My phone buzzed again, and when I opened the chat, there was a pretty picture of Ryan. My jaw dropped, and one of the girls grabbed the phone and exclaimed, "Holy crap, what is this?" I quickly replied, "No, it's not Dave. It's the other guy. We have an open relationship." I don't know why I said that, and I immediately felt terrible. They all looked at me and laughed. I looked at the photo again, cleverly moved it to a hidden folder, and deleted the correspondence. I ended up going back to JJ's loft and started making out with one of her friends. The next morning, I woke up with a hangover and a feeling of deep regret about what I had done the night before. I burst into tears and then got angry, thinking, to hell with Dave. He's always on the road, and I'm young and want to have fun. It was a confession that frightened me, but I was stubborn, like a true Irish woman, and rebellious. I spent the whole day on the couch. I cried, then got angry. I texted Dave, apologizing for the way I spoke to him last night. He replied that he loved me with all his heart and that there was nothing wrong with me having fun with JJ and her company. He trusted me completely and regretted appearing possessive. I told him I loved him too and asked him to call me later. Later, I received a message from Ryan asking, "Did the photo scare you?" I didn't answer. I had a lot to think about. Dave and I spoke in the evening, and there was a sense of tension in the conversation. He tried to act calm, and I tried not to feel guilty. He said he missed me and couldn't wait to get home on Friday. I hung up, still feeling depressed. I was still tormented by the events of last night. The next day, I had to go to work, and I needed sleep. Melissa, Thursday at the store, Katie was on fire all day. She made me laugh. We ate a couple of THC gummies, and I almost showed her a photo of Ryan. The store was busy this morning, and we broke sales records, so I felt great. Katie left around 5, and the store closed at 6. I was high, tired, but in a good mood when Ryan walked in at 5:55. He looked simply amazing. Faded white jeans, flip-flops, and a black t-shirt. He was tall and thin, his hair neatly trimmed, and his face clean-shaven. He walked up to the counter and smelled incredible. That's made me angry. "Hey, Melissa, I just wanted to apologize for sending you the photo," he said. I immediately blushed and replied, "No need to apologize." It was pretty impressive, and no, it didn't scare me. I explained that the day before, I had been with my friends, got drunk, and had an argument with my boyfriend. He looked at me and said, "I thought he was your fiancé." I don't know why, but I quickly replied, "Well, yes, but not really. Dave is much older than me. He proposed and I accepted, but we don't have a date yet." I was all on edge. "Oh, okay. Anyway, I just wanted to apologize and make sure you're not mad at me," he said, adding, "I really like you, Melissa." I thought for a second and then nervously replied, "Hey, do you want to stay and keep me company while I close up the store?" He quickly agreed, and I locked the door, turned off the lights, and we walked into the back office. We smoked some weed and chatted while I counted the register and did the closing. He kept looking at me with those eyes, and then he came up and said, "You are so beautiful. Can I kiss you?" I was so intoxicated, and we started kissing. I wasn't wearing the prettiest clothes, but Ryan seemed to lose his head. "Ryan, we shouldn't do this," I said. "I know," he replied, "but I can't stop." His eyes sparkled, and he leaned back on the table. Melissa walked up to Ryan, feeling her heart pounding with excitement. She slowly leaned toward him, their eyes meeting. At that moment, it seemed as though the whole world had stopped. As she began to unbutton his jeans, her hands shook slightly. She knew that this moment would change something in her life, and despite all her doubts, she was determined to find out what it was like to be so close to him. Melissa gently touched his thighs, and Ryan closed his eyes for a moment, lost in his feelings. She knew she was attracted to him, and that gave her confidence. "You are so strong and beautiful," she whispered, barely touching his skin. All she wanted at that moment was to feel their closeness, which would become something new and exciting for her. She continued to move slowly, enjoying every moment. When Ryan opened his eyes, his gaze was full of gratitude and warmth. He carefully took her hands and pulled her toward him, their breaths merging into one. He smiled and said quietly, "You have no idea how much I was looking forward to this." Melissa smiled back, feeling their hearts beat in sync. She looked at him and realized that he really was in love with her. It was nice to know that he liked her so much. She let go and kissed him deeply, then said, "Ryan, we need to stop. I need to go home." We got dressed. He asked if I could meet him again, and I said, "I don't know if there will be a next time." He looked depressed. I looked at him and explained, "Ryan, that was hot. I had a great time. I'm really into you, but I don't know what to do with all this." "Okay." He just smiled at me. I realized that it had the same effect on other girls. "Okay, Mel," he said. I stopped abruptly. "Please don't call me that." He looked at me and shrugged. "Okay, Melissa. Look, I really, really like you, and I want to see you again." He kissed me deeply, and I shuddered. He was a good lover. I walked him out the front door, closed it, and returned to the office, trying to put everything in order. I locked the store, drove to the loft, and thought about calling Katie to tell her I wouldn't be coming to work tomorrow. I had to work at the restaurant that evening, and Dave was supposed to be back the next day. When I returned home, I cleaned my pen again and stood in the shower for a long time. What had I done? What was I going to do? But if I thought about it seriously, did I have feelings for him? Was Dave still the same man for me? I sat there crying until Dave called me. I didn't answer the phone, letting the call go to voicemail. I texted him that I wasn't feeling well and was already in bed, so I'd see him tomorrow when he got home. It was a refusal, and he understood it. And I understood this. I started crying again. The next morning, I woke up early and texted Dave, wishing him a good flight, telling him I loved him, and asking him to text me when he landed. I took a shower again. I knew that in the evening, I would have to sleep with Dave. Honestly, I really wanted this. In the morning, I finally decided that I wanted to be with Dave and would die if I lost him. He was my best friend, and I loved him with all my heart. I spent the whole morning convincing myself that yesterday was a one-time incident. I was a little late for the store. Katie immediately noticed the mess in the office and asked, "What the hell happened here?" I immediately blushed, lowered my eyes, and said, "I slept with Ryan in the office yesterday after closing." Katie's eyes widened, and she laughed. "You? I knew you would sleep with him," she said. We both laughed, although I laughed less willingly. Katie was hungry for details. "Okay, redneck, spit it out." I smiled, looked at her, and said, "Katie, Ryan's is really huge." Katie dragged me into the office. Katie stopped, hugged me, and said, "Redneck, you are a hot young woman. You deserve to be owned whenever and by whomever you want." I pulled my jeans back on and tidied up the office. Katie later noticed that I wasn't as happy as I should have been after such an adventure. She looked at me and asked, "Are you going to break up with Dave?" "El no irá. This morning, I realized that I couldn't live without him. I burst into tears again. She looked at me and asked, "Are you going to sleep with Ryan again?" I shook my head. No, but my eyes said I don't know. I shouldn't do this if I want to stay with Dave. "Are you going to tell Dave?" Katie asked. "Maybe. I don't know," I replied. Although, Dave is a pervert and would probably enjoy a threesome with a girl or even a guy. "Maybe," Katie said, "but there isn't a man who doesn't feel threatened by another man, Mel. I think you're incomplete. Pardon the pun, confusion. Also, you should just enjoy life. You're always saying that Dave might leave you or that you think he's sleeping with other girls, and you're supposedly in an open relationship. Maybe you should directly discuss an open relationship with him. You're only 23, Mel. Live for your pleasure or make a choice. If Dave finds out in some nasty way, you know it's going to end." This thought scared the crap out of me. I received a message from Ryan, but I ignored it. I had too many thoughts in my head. Maybe Dave and I already had an open relationship. I grabbed this idea for a second, but do I really want that? When I imagined him with another woman, it shocked me. Katie's right. I'm completely screwed. I stubbornly thought that it was all harmless fun and that I deserved it. Dave will never know. Subscribe to our channel so your partner doesn't cheat on you. And go ahead and listen to the next story because this one is nothing compared to the next. If you're under 18, don't even think about it. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.